Hi, Megan. Good to see
Hi,
you.
it's good to see you. How are you?
So good. Thank you for joining me today. So, for listeners to know, if you're listening or watching this, Megan is one of the people that I interviewed for the staff designer. And I had seen the LinkedIn post from Megan first, and then we got to yap a bunch after that LinkedIn post went viral. And so I had to, of course, interview Megan for the book. And a lot has happened in the past 1+ years. So I wanted to, for this
Years now.
episode, yeah, it's kind of wild how long ago I was starting to write this book. But yes, I'm sure people would love to know a little bit more about you. So please give us an updated intro. Who are you? What are you working on right now? And how has your relationship to the role of super senior design evolved since we last talked?
Yes. So actually, one thing I'll say is forgetting that when I wrote the interview guide, I messaged you and was like, hey, you wrote this awesome article on interviews. Can I quote it? And you were like, yeah. And that's
That's
when
so
I
real.
was still, I'm not going to say nobody because I think that's hilarious to say, but that's when I hadn't really done anything. And I was like, oh, who is this cat small person? She's so awesome. But then we really connected, I think, after that. And you were
Yeah,
like,
you're right.
oh, hey,
Oh my God,
but
time
that's
is so
totally okay.
weird. Yeah, yeah. No,
No, it
I
is.
remember because I remember we did talk, and then I remember my friend Asia shared your post in a group chat that we were in, and I was like, "Oh, it's Megan." And then yeah, we had some back and forth and some internet yapping and some Zoom yapping, and then yeah, I've loved that
Oh
we've
my gosh.
kept over
Me
intersecting
too.
over time. Yeah.
Can you imagine if I had not messaged you being like, can I quote you in this thing? And then because I didn't think it was going to go viral and then it did. And then you're like, who's this weirdo stealing my work in this
No
thing? Like,
way.
no,
No,
I know
I
you would
actually
never do
like it
that,
when
but
people quote me or yeah, I think that design is a very I don't know. I as a person who also has practiced art, I think that people inspire each other. So
totally.
I'm happy that we're here.
Me too.
That is really but yes. So you wrote a viral post and you created an artifact that was really helpful for people.
Yes. It's probably super outdated now, but it was a product design interview playbook. And actually, it's definitely outdated by this point because the playbook mentions nothing about AI,
Our
unfortunately.
favorite word.
Yeah, or fortunately. But yeah, so I am currently at Stripe. I am lead product designer. I work on developer platform and developer tools. And so a lot of the work that I do focuses on our Workbench tool. So it's like when you log into Stripe, there's like a little bar at the bottom and you can open it. It's called Workbench and it has like health insights. You can use the shell. You can use, or you can view events, webhooks, etc. So super developer friendly. And so that's what I'm focused on now. And I think you had one last question. Now I'm blanking on it. It
Yeah.
was, what's
Yeah. I mean,
changed?
that's the yeah, how your relationship
Yeah.
has evolved over time since I know you were at a previous job before.
Yeah. It's changed in really healthy ways, I would say. I think after I made that post that went viral, I got really lost in the sauce of the design world where all of a sudden people were messaging me and that I always admired and pulling me into conversations. And then I got to do a talk at the Design Leadership Summit. And I was really giving away pieces of myself with no boundaries on who and how I gave it away. And I wasn't charging for anything. And obviously, I'm sure as a lot of speaking things are not paid. So it's not like you make money off of the stuff you talk about until you hit it big and maybe they pay at config, which is pretty sick. So congrats and shout out to that. But yeah, so I think it's changed in a way that's like, I still believe all the principles of what I've always believed in within design, being a staff designer and what's important within the role, but it's more like the most that's changed is probably the relationship with myself and how much I allow my personal worth and self-worth to be connected to how successful I am as a designer, which is a really slippery slope when you create content and you connect with a lot of people and you have people telling you how helpful it is. You're like, oh, maybe I could do more. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I can share these insights with big groups of people and add something good to the world and whatever other things I was thinking at the time. Yeah. And then you reach a point where you're like, man, this is everything is so exhausting. I have to try to find to make time for everything. And now all I've become is work.
Yeah.
So it's mostly that relationship with design. I still am, maybe I'm, uh, I don't know the right word, but old school with how I'm like, I just think the formulas always work. And that's why it's a formula. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear what quotes you're going to pull because I totally forget what quotes I've given you in the past. So I'm like, but I probably still stand by them.
Yeah. Yeah. Firstly, thank you for sharing. I totally understand where you're coming from, where as a person who has written a lot over the years and tried to share a bunch of resources with people, you can spend a lot of your time and energy diving as deep as you want. And there's always more that you could be doing and more that you could be giving to other people. And at some point, you have to figure out the best ratio of how much energy you are spending contributing to the design community versus literally just earning the money to be able to eat and pay for all your responsibilities versus family, friends, all the things. It can really get out of whack at times. And so I think it's great that you've figured out, okay, I need to adjust where I'm at so that I can have a more sustainable experience as a designer.
Yeah. And self worth really does impact how you perform at your job too, because I realized the better I felt in my contributions to design in general, I felt, I think, important. And as somebody that didn't have the opportunity to get a degree, I couldn't afford school and I don't have a traditional background in that sense. I am going back to school, by the way. I'm on track to get an associate's in political science and then I want to get a bachelor's in law.
Wow.
But yeah, probably a different conversation. But I always felt this imposter syndrome and I never felt good enough. And so there was this moment where it was like, oh, I can offer value to the community and to others, and maybe I do know what I'm doing, right? Maybe I do. And it's funny because you can do it for years and you hit I was at what 8 or 9 years or something like that. I've been saying 10 years for 13 years. So I need to start updating my intros and verbiage and whatever, but I've been doing it for a while and even when you're at the 6 year or 7 year mark, you still sometimes think, what am I doing? Do I know what I'm doing? Do people believe me? Do I know how I'm making suggestions or how I'm reaching solutions? And I think that was always tied to this traditional education thing that I thought that I needed, and that was really the first moment in my career where I was like, "Maybe I do have value to offer," and I performed a lot better at work in that period too, where I was like, I kinda broke my own judgments on myself after that.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you maybe it sounds like you get to a place where it's less about the external validation and the fancy official title trappings and all of that stuff and it's more about what is it feeding your lifestyle? Is it doing things that you feel are worth your time? Are you able to spend time outside of the work time doing things that you care about? Those also are really important things to consider versus maybe feeling, oh, my boss needs to tell me if I'm doing a good job or things of that nature. And was actually curious to your point of that you started showing up and contributing more value, it sounds like, when you cared a little bit less about how you were appearing. What does it look like when a staff designer or like when a designer is genuinely adding value versus performing the appearance of adding value?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 thoughts I have on that. The first is there's always the thing that's written in the formula, meaning what they tell you senior versus staff is. And they'll usually say the line between senior and staff is somebody that starts to make contributions across teams and within the org. And they're given very little direction. They typically find those opportunities. They apply themselves. They find solutions. They're like more of a go getter that doesn't wait for the permission. And I'm not saying senior does either. I think that's why titles can be tricky because a lot of companies will have titles, but then the definitions are super, super thin between one another, right? What makes this is very close to what makes this. But what I think was really important to actually showing up in a staff capacity versus feeling personally like I was performative was one, it's going to sound so corny, but it was actually believing myself, believing things I was saying, believing things I was doing. Because by that point, I had seen output and impact of the work that I was doing and feeling, okay, when I feel more confident in what I'm saying and the decisions that I'm making, there are positive impacts that are happening. There are positive outputs that are happening. Now, what did it take to get there? What were the outputs that I contributed to versus what did I own? And sometimes when you're in a staff position and you find yourself getting a lot of feedback, you have to be able to make a decision or snap out of it, is what I would say. It's actually happened to me recently where you can get lost in lots of different stakeholder opinions. And it's your job or responsibility to look across all of them and still make the decision that you know is best with your professional skills and background to say,
Yeah.
okay, this is what business needs, this is what user needs, this is what we need. I know stakeholders need this, but I'm going to have to make a decision, even if it's not exactly what every other stakeholder wants. Otherwise, you end up with what I've been calling a Frankenstein process, where
Yeah.
you've stitched together pieces of what everyone's telling you it needs to be. That now you're going to be in the room with an executive or a C suite or whoever, and they're going to say, why did this thing happen? Why did it shift this way? And you won't be able to answer straightforward.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest difference is just you have to take, and I'm very systems minded. So apologies if I use very systems minded language, but
Love it.
you take a lot of input from a lot of different places. And you are, at the end of the day, no matter who gave you input, you are always going to be responsible for the output. You really have to own it and speak to it. And you have to start saying no to people. And I think that's something a lot of people are uncomfortable with because you think you're going to be negatively impacted if you say no. But I had a leader a couple years ago actually tell me, he like pulled me aside and he was like, people can tell you don't trust yourself and like they don't trust you. And if you don't trust
Wow.
yourself, why are people going to trust you? That was in 2020. And it was so embarrassing when I got that feedback. I felt really ashamed of myself, but I think it's the best, most real feedback I have ever gotten. He wasn't even a design manager either. He was actually a growth manager.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was just really straightforward, which depending on how
Shout
you
outs
look
to
at it,
him.
could be good
Yeah.
or bad. Yeah. But he was right. And I was like, yeah, what the hell am I doing? If I'm not being confident in what I suggest and other people are picking up on that, yeah, how are they going to trust me? I don't trust myself. And it's true. And so I think in the staff position, you can't, it will falter. I will say that. So I'm not saying you
Yeah.
can't, but you have to really maintain a grip on how much you let it falter. Otherwise, people will pick up on it and you'll find yourself making decisions because other people told you to.
That's so real. I've definitely had to learn to push back in a way that's respectful and to also accept that maybe I don't always know the answer, but I have an idea about what could get us closer to the answer. And sometimes that's okay. You don't have to know everything, but being able to say, hey, we don't know this, and this is something that I think can help us actually learn the answer. And I would prefer that we learn the answer to this thing as best as we can so we can make the most informed decision because this risk exists, for example. And I find that's a great way to not quite hedge, but to make it clear, hey, like I'm comfortable with ambiguity, not knowing the answer to everything. And at the same time, I would highly recommend that we spend the time doing this. Or maybe you do know the solution, but it's uncomfortable to be that person who calls it out. I've had situations like that pretty recently, in fact, where I had a team, I was working on this one project where we've got like all these objects within our product space and there were ideas around like maybe we should like make a new one or should we use one that's confusing? We haven't quite figured out how it fits in with the rest of the product. And I was like, okay, whoa, 1 second. Why don't we find out what users actually need first? And then we can figure out what this needs to become. So if we want to go with the existing one, we might have to transform it somehow, gasp. Or maybe we make a new object. I wouldn't recommend that for these reasons. And it felt uncomfortable to be like, hey, I know that leadership is like, please use this existing object, but we might actually need to change it a lot to make that work. And I think it's better to have that discussion up front than to basically just try to force users to adopt something that we just know that they're not going to, or I know based on prior
Yeah.
experience, it's going to be a bad time. So I'm happy to have that conversation in a preventative way.
Yeah. And communication is your best tool. And you bring up a good point that I probably should have mentioned. Like design should never be a blocker, but it should be guidance. And if there are stakeholders you disagree with, you have to communicate why and you have to have a good reason. And so I've heard people say the best ideas don't win, but the loudest voice does. And I think there's nuance to that statement and somewhere in the middle where I actually think the best logic and the best reasoning wins. I don't necessarily listen to the loudest voice, even though they can claim the most time. So if you can give business stakeholders, whoever it is, whether it's a PM, an engineer, whoever, a reason why you believe what you believe, and
Yeah.
even better if you have some data to back it or some type of trend or pattern, whatever that looks like, you'll always get further with that. And I did find when I was afraid to say no, I thought it was because I actually didn't have language for what I was feeling internally and what I was tuning into, right? We call it product sense, but I think outside of work, I would say I have some level of clairvoyance and clairsentience. It's like intuition, not to be woo woo, but
Yeah, we love an intuition.
yeah. So it's like when I didn't have language from it, which makes a huge difference, by the way, I would say between mid level, senior, and then senior to staff is a more refined version. But I would just say, I don't know if that's the right solution, but I could never really explain it. And when I learned the tools to be like, here's why, and here's how I think we can get there, here's where I think your feedback's valid, right? Because you want to validate it. It's not coming from nothing, it's not always irrelevant, but and here's what I think. I found that people are really receptive to that.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And this is such a dorky pitch, but in this book, this wonderful book here that I wrote, there's a whole chapter on actually getting people to listen to your ideas. So if you find that you are struggling, there is hope. Yeah. Yeah.
Right on my desk, not the blurry background.
Oh yeah, I think you have to do the little hand thing and I think they do it for makeup. Yeah.
That work.
There it is. So fun. But yes, there's a whole part about just building influence. But okay, speaking of the book, in chapter 2, I quoted you, I believe, as I think you said something about there was a one size fits all, like you can't do like a one size fits all kind of process because if you try to do that, it is essentially going to result in a lot of friction. Yeah, you said if you're on a small and lean team, you probably won't be able to have that much research. Your odds of your org giving you weeks to run research are slim to none, and the odds of your org having a budget even to run research or implement analytics is maybe even lower. And that maybe you need to lean into design heuristics and best practices that give you data points. So you need to be flexible. That's something that I really appreciated that you had mentioned. And I obviously you mentioned that you're in a new role. What have you noticed as you've made that transition between some of the places you've worked before? And how are you keeping that adaptive spirit alive?
Yeah, I think that's something that Stripe really appreciates about their designers. And I talked about it a lot in my interview, some of the processes that I've had and how I pull out different tools in my tool shed. I find that a lot of the way that we've been approaching design since I started, I think I'm almost at 5 months, 4 months, 5 months, something like that now. But
Yay.
it's a lot of conversation and there's a lot of respect put into the designers and what their opinions and their thoughts are. I have found that I still believe that that's true and the statement's true. You can't apply a one size fits all to everything because it's kind of like when you learn to drive and you're driving a car and it's probably like driving a manual car. You have to know when to shift gears. You have to know the right moment, the right speeds, and you have to be able to have good control over it. And I don't know if you've ever ridden in a car with somebody that can't drive stick shift very well, but has a stick shift vehicle. You can really
Well,
feel the
yeah.
tension between shifts, right? And I think that's what it is when you're a designer and you're pulling from your toolbox. A couple examples could be I'm on a project right now where we want to move fast, but we also want to make sure that the solution we're giving or we're providing to the problem is the right one. In this instance, where even though Stripe's a really large company, the team that I'm on, we have a dedicated researcher, but researchers, I feel like they're so far and few between now at organizations. It's from like a niche role for some reason. I think they're really
Mhm.
important, but for some reason it's niche. But they have a million projects on their plate. And you're still an end to end designer no matter where you are, even if they have a researcher, right? I have found that utilizing past research and then being able to talk to technical account managers or some of the PMs that are really involved with that part of the process and account managers, not just technical account. So there's a difference. We have AMs and TAMs that I can gather enough information to inform the decision that is going to potentially solve the problem in a way that doesn't completely bypass that part of the process. And so the thing that I love about the team I'm on now is I'll be honest, we did hit like analysis paralysis in some instances where we're going back and forth as a group on, well, could the solution look like this? And well, what about this? And what if it looked like that? And we had plenty of research and data to go from. Like they had talked to customers that we could really consider in the solution. So it wasn't like we were starting from nothing, but it was being the voice that's like, guys, can we just get this in front of some merchants and like test stuff and just see what they think? Because you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
which I know sounds obvious, but like you don't know what you don't know, and we can only keep guessing. And I think like we've gotten as far as we can get with what we have. And so I feel like the the position you'll find yourself in a lot as a designer is like they always say that the further you climb up the ladder, the less design you do, which is kind of true. I think you're still designing, you're just designing in other ways, and sometimes it's a little
Yeah.
more abstract. And in this instance, I think it's like being able to feel comfortable enough to say things out loud, to communicate with people that you don't really know that well, right? Because I just started and I didn't want to seem like I had huge opinions from the start because you want to build trust with your teammates and like lean into those partnerships. So it's a really delicate balance. I definitely don't push on things, but I do offer a handful of solutions just to see how people feel about them that we can test. So maybe solutions is the wrong word, ideas that we can test and validate and see where they go.
I think that was very clear and helpful.
They really, really value communication here. And so if you aren't comfortable communicating things that you might not even really be confident in yet, because I'm finding it's challenging because when you first start somewhere, you're learning the product, you're learning the team, you're learning the org, and Stripe does a really good job. They put you through a couple days of onboarding in person, and they give these incredible presentations about the company and everything you need to know as a new Stripe. And so you're learning a lot, and you're going to be getting a lot of information. And then you're also going to have projects that you spin up on. And they give you an onboarding buddy. They want you to succeed, right? So they give you everything you would need to succeed. And I found in previous roles, like, that's not always the case. I would say in my last role, they just kind of, it felt like I walked on a plank and they kind of kicked me into the water, and I figured it out. But not everybody should be in that position. And I think I'm comfortable being more outspoken and a little bit louder, and I'm not really afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
I think not everybody has the luxury to ask questions. I'm going to be honest, like, something that we don't talk about a lot is like, in previous roles, I won't name any companies or anything like that, but in previous roles, I have had POC coworkers who have shared like they're not really comfortable pushing back a lot because they feel like there's more to lose for them, and I think that
Yeah.
that's true.
That's
I do
real.
I do think they're more at risk if they want to speak up, and I feel like that's where I use my privilege, is to speak up, to say stuff. I'm not afraid to say stuff when a lot of times people can't. And so not everybody should be put in that position where you walk a plank and you're thrown in and you're in the water and you can figure it out maybe, but should you have to? And I think that's a big difference here at Stripe, is they give you all the tools to be really successful. And I find that I don't have to ask questions that maybe in previous roles made people think I was rocking a boat by asking them, when I wasn't, by the way. Like, I'm naturally very curious. I just like to understand. And some people, I think, take questions as a challenge, whereas my current role really welcomes questions because they want everybody to be intentional and mindful.
Yeah.
And so that it is a difference in environment. I think it really enables the type of designer you can be. And I also just want there to be acknowledgement that you can still be a really good designer, and maybe you have a different personality from other people, and that should never be a hindrance at the company that you're in.
Yeah.
If you just shouldn't be put in a position that maybe designers shouldn't be put in, right? Like it's not rocking a boat to ask a question, and then you have layers to that where some people don't feel safe asking questions. And I'm privileged enough to recognize that I can and I have. But being at a company that welcomes that is very different than being at a company that does not welcome that.
Yeah, often when I speak with designers in mentorship conversations, I will talk to them about the importance of understanding the culture that the company was founded in. And so, if you have a company that was founded in San Francisco, there's potentially going to be some communication culture, for example, that is, partially influenced by that location versus a Midwestern company or an East Coast company. I think when I've worked for companies that were founded in New York, they're a bit more direct with their communication than Midwestern or Californian companies or like West Coast companies. And then I've worked for a German employer, which was awesome because I love directness. And I think for some people, it was very hard for them to get used to it. But I was like, wow, everybody really just tells me what they think. And it's very helpful for my anxiety to just know all the time.
Me too.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Some people are neurodivergent, and I feel like I say this on every corner of the internet that I'm on, but I need people to be direct. Okay, I'm so bad at reading between the lines. I can't guess what people are thinking. I think it's so dangerous to make people guess what you're thinking. I hate it.
Yeah, it's
And,
exhausting.
I've heard from other people in Europe, especially Germany. I work with, his name's Thorsten, and he is the founder of the Sustainable UX community, and he's from Germany. And I told him he's very direct, and I'm kind of used to this culture where I've heard feedback, like I said, where Americans really tend to beat around the bush and don't just say what they're thinking. You have to do a lot of guessing. And I've actually heard that foreigners mistake that as us being very fake and surface level and kind of
Yeah.
just not
Well, genuine, authentic.
genuine.
Yeah.
Yes, genuine. And I really spent time thinking about that the last year, because I realized, like, when I'm more direct at work, it's so easy to be like, get okay, this is probably a different podcast, but why, when women are more direct in their role, because you have to be, as a
Yeah.
staff designer, you have to be direct.
You have to communicate your intentions.
So
Yeah. You have to
people
be
can be
clear.
like, she's a B, she's a
Yeah.
B, right? But then when other people do it, they're like, oh, strong leader.
Love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And oh, I hate that. And I was hopeful we were moving away from that. And now I think the state of the world has me being like, I don't know what's going on. So we were talking about before we started the show, right? I'm just gonna go ride my bike. But yeah, it pushes the limits when you're in staff roles of your professional comfort, your personal comfort, maybe even comfort related to your gender, your skin color, your
Yeah.
orientation, things that people have boxed you in previous roles or even in your life. you'll find those coming out when you're in a role where you have to communicate and say things. Otherwise, you might be on the hook for stuff that you don't want to be on the hook for.
Yeah, yeah, that's real. One of the other topics that I have had a lot of conversations with, not in a mentorship context as much, but during some of the cohorts of the staff designer course that I run, has been around operating as a marginalized quote unquote person within the context of the workplace. And I think it is a unique challenge because you can't use the white guy playbook, frankly.
Yeah.
Some, of course, not, I don't want to generalize because every person is different and every workplace is different. But yeah, a lot of times you will find that if you use some of those tools from that toolkit or that playbook, that the response is different. And a lot of when I've reflected in the book and in the course and in the conversations with people, I try to really dig into, let's figure out what's going to work for your particular situation, because you're going to have to frankly experiment a lot to just figure out where's the line and how can you
Yeah.
still communicate in a way that's important and valuable and at the level that is necessary, while also understanding that sometimes people are just going to be threatened, frankly, by your existence, and you can't control that fully. And segue alert, but in chapter 6, I actually did end up quoting you about something else that I feel like is relevant, which is you had mentioned that you recommend treating collaborators as user research participants, and that sometimes there are going to be people who are really defensive. Maybe they feel threatened, and you have to figure out how to empathize with these people, potentially who might even be viewing you in a particularly odd way. And I'm curious how you go about coaxing people out of that, or how you navigate those kinds of situations, and what you've learned over the past year and a half or two about managing stakeholders.
Yeah. I've always joked that designers are like a mix of attorneys and therapists and mommies because we're just kind of managing communicating things,
So
but
real.
all the time. Yeah. And I still stand by that because what everybody's human in the place of work, right? People have stuff they bring to work, whether or not they realize it, right? Like baggage, trauma, whatever. And that influences your responses. And we don't talk about that enough in the place of work, that a lot of the times responses you get from people are direct directly related to wherever they're at in their life. Maybe they've had a couple of shitty weeks, maybe they have triggers, trauma, whatever. And I think part of it is having a really clear mind with stakeholders, where understanding that the thing I'm designing, we're designing as a team, whoever's designing it, it's a project that everybody's wants to be successful. We all want to make it to the end, to the finish line. And nobody should take it personal if we go one direction versus another, wherever maybe their heart was in one direction, we go another one. I can't remember if I've said this to you before, but years ago, like 15 years ago, somebody once told me business has no emotions. And I'm always really back and forth on that quote because in some way I'm like, I operate better on that frequency of business has no emotions. Also, as a person, I'm really empathetic. And so I like to be emotional with people because I think it's human, and which we need today with AI everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But I will say it's very helpful if you don't get too emotional about the projects you're in, because then you'll find that you are responding or reacting to those types of stakeholders more than you are moving the conversation forward. And so when it comes to stakeholders, I think everybody deserves a platform to share their perspective. A lot of the times people want to be heard. There are people who have been at the company longer than you and maybe they have more context. And so I do like to treat them as research sessions because they have some information that's always helpful to something, even if you don't know it yet. I like to keep notes and write stuff down. Sometimes they know about teams that have tried similar projects. Maybe they know about a team that is actually doing something right now that's really similar. And you'll find as a staff designer, you are also responsible for connecting those threads.
Yeah.
And if you don't talk to more people with a different perspective, and it doesn't even have to be within product, like Ryan Scott, actually, when I took his ROI of design course a couple of years ago, he had a slide on making allies in the company and talked a lot about the customer facing teams like sales, go to marketing, customer success. And I started leaning into that. And I found the more partnerships you build across the org, not just within product, you will unlock so much information about customer behaviors or solutions they've tried in the past, things they're hearing when they're out in the field, when they are doing customer calls. And so treating those people like users of the product, I think, is very valuable into shaping a solution that is very dynamic and still solves the problems, but offers different perspectives. I found sometimes when I go to a PM or an eng or somebody directly in my pod and I share stuff from across the org, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's super helpful. I would say the way that it's changed in the last year and a half is, you know, my journey and stuff I've been through personally. And just as a quick note, I lost my mom in October and I had to do a lot of reflection around where I put my energy, my time, etc. And I found that and this is personal. My mom sent me a text message a couple days before she died. I'm trying not to get teary eyed, but she sent me a text a couple days before she died. And I was so stressed out with where I was previous to this. And I read it and I was like, I will respond later. I just have a million things to do.
Mm,
And I'm sure you can see where this is going.
yeah.
I didn't respond. And she passed. She sent it on a Wednesday. She passed on Saturday very unexpectedly. And so I thought to myself, I let myself be so caught up in this world that I couldn't even find the time to respond because I was so preoccupied with all this intense stuff happening.
Yeah.
And the biggest change from that is really leaning into everybody wants it to succeed, trusting everybody's intention,
Yeah.
and communicating the impact. If it's negative, let them know, and obviously, a business professional way, but not getting too attached to things because things are going to change. And you'll find as a designer, you'll start fighting battles that you don't have to.
Yep.
And when you reflect, it might be because you were emotionally attached to things. And so you mentioned as part of the quote that I had said, sometimes those stakeholders can be reactive or sometimes they can be dismissive. If that impacts you, if you try to think of yourself as a journalist in that instance where you can't really be impacted by the content that you're trying to get information about in those moments, you'll be able to move through those conversations easier when you just take everything as data input. Okay, that was a data point I just got from people, even if it's not literal, right? No one's giving you a literal number, but they're telling you stuff. And then you execute on it. So I actually still do that. I still follow that. I still believe that. And the biggest difference is really leaning into design being a facilitator and somebody that unblocks and moves forward, and not Megan is a designer that has feelings about these things.
Yeah.
Removing that really will level you up in a lot of ways. And I can be very honest and vulnerable to say I struggled with that.
Yeah, I was also a very defensive person, especially before 2020. And after that, I was like, oh, I need to re examine my relationship to this work because this is not life or death. And I need to be very realistic about how much energy I am investing emotionally into this. And I think it made me a much better coworker, frankly, because I wasn't constantly fighting with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can help your other coworkers that you recognize might be in that position
Yes. Yeah,
where you're like,
I've
ah,
done
I
that.
recognize that.
Yeah, I've for sure noted that amongst my coworkers as well and very calmly said to them, "Hey, love that you care. And also, let's make sure that we remember that this is an e-commerce website or cloud storage or whatever and we are not doctors, etc. Maybe you're a design doctor and you have a PhD or whatever, but that's very different
God,
from people who are literally right now saving lives. And if the button color is secondary instead of primary, it's fine.
I
Like
know.
we can always go back and fix it. Please don't lose sleep over this. Don't work on the weekends. I always have to tell this to people. It's hard.
You said something in your class. So when I took your one of the cohort, I don't know what cohort I was, but when I took the class, you said something that I think all the time. And you said, not my circus, not my monkeys, or
Yes.
whichever one. I don't remember. Is it
Yeah,
not
yeah,
my
yeah.
monkeys, not my circus? It's one or the other, right?
Yeah, I think I think you had it right the first time, but yes,
Okay.
yes, for sure. Yeah, it's
Um,
like these are not, yeah, this is
and
not my problem.
yeah, I hear your voice sometimes when I think about stuff. Honestly, even in my personal life, where I'm like, yeah, I'll hear that, and I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
not my
not my
circus.
monkeys, not my circus. Yeah, like I'm just gonna leave it. And I think that's so true. And yeah, obviously, there's a million valuable things in your courses. Which, by the way, I still have that course playlist on my Spotify.
Oh,
But yeah, but
thanks for making that, by the way. That was so fun. So for context, yeah, Megan made a playlist of all the songs that people had included in their intro posts. And yeah, what a wonderful way to pump yourself up.
yeah, it was different vibe from song to song, but it was super fun. And by the way, everyone in the course, I will say, like for anybody that hasn't taken your course, do you still offer it? You still offer
Yeah,
it? Like,
yeah, yeah.
okay,
There's
yeah.
another cohort coming out soon. Yeah.
You're like a mad woman. You just stay so booked and busy.
I love it. It's fun.
Yeah. The course, everybody in there is just so awesome and talented. I found that I like how engaged everybody is. I find that the content you cover is stuff that I couldn't find anywhere on the internet. And the internet is really overwhelming. I just don't do
Yeah.
well with Google searches anymore. I just don't.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah. And you don't know what's true and what's not. And when I say that, I mean everybody has opinions on design. And so I don't know. I found your book and your coursework and just our conversations in general to be something that feels more applicable and more relevant and more logical. And I don't mean that in a shady way, like other people
Yeah.
do things that are illogical. I just mean it in a way that it just makes sense to me. You have a formula and
Yeah.
it makes sense to me.
I'm a formula girly, so totally hear you on
Yeah.
that, and that makes me
Yeah.
very happy. Now, I do want to mention, I know you mentioned the acronym du jour at this moment in the tech world, AI. So I do want to talk about that as well for a second. I'm curious how you've been thinking about AI and how it's affected the way that you operate and how you use that in your work.
Ugh. I think AI was so cool when it first came out. I was really entranced by it. My relationship with AI is so complicated. You kind of have to use it to stay relevant, I think.
Yeah, right
I'll
now.
say, God, I know. I'm like, what should I say that doesn't just go on this long ramble?
I love a ramble. I'm just
Yeah,
saying, this is
I just have
podcast,
so much to
so
say about it. I think AI, I feel fear that other people feel. I feel fearful that people will mistake AI as a replacement for design. I just don't think AI is going to replace things the way people think it is. Because as somebody that uses it every day, it's just not there. I just don't see it. And I
yeah.
think there are things in the world that are human for a reason. And even when I think about older generations, I don't know, is boomer a slur? I don't know. Can I say boomer? Because boomers, they don't want to talk to a robot on the phone. So when every company is like,
True.
"Oh, we're gonna replace every customer support specialist with," by the way, they've been just
They have been
offshoring it.
trying. It's weird. I called like a beauty clinic recently, but yeah, it was like an AI assistant. I could tell because of the intonation. I was just like, whoa, this is
I
very
know.
uncomfortable and strange. And there were typing noises in the background. So it was like they were trying to act like this was a real person, but it was very obvious,
I hate
no.
that.
Yeah, it's so
Like,
strange.
okay, this is my hot take. I think we're gonna enter a future where so many people are trying to use AI that businesses are gonna succeed by marketing that they have humans. That's my
Yes.
thought. I've been saying that for a couple of years now. I think it's gonna be true. And you've even seen companies that have laid people off by saying they're going to replace them with AI because of whatever BS reason, right? It's all BS. Production increase, this, that's not true. I don't know if I can drop names, Duolingo. And they had a lot of backlash.
Yep.
People were protesting them, uninstalling them, looking at different apps to use. Because what world do we want to live in where AI replaces everything and everyone? Yeah, boomers don't want to call a thing and not talk to a person.
People
And
previously wanted to talk to a person, and now they even more want to talk to a
yeah,
person.
yes. And my partner and I joke, I don't know if there's like TikTok that's like, it was like the future. It was really funny. It was like a parody, but they were referring to AI as a slur, right? They were like clankers. And so my partner and I just say, we'll be playing Words with Friends versus a bot, but we'll be
Oh,
like, we're playing this clanker's kicking my ass, stuff like that. But
oh.
a real answer. Stripe has been super thoughtful about AI, which I really appreciate. They take a lot of surveys and communicate a lot about how we feel in general about AI in our workflows, but we would like to see if there's support that we need. If we were gonna have to use it, which they haven't mandated or anything like that, we don't have to use
Sheesh.
it.
Yeah.
But if they're also very with it, right? I think what I really appreciate about them is they keep a pulse on the trends and what's happening in the space that they're like, we know this is happening. And how do you feel about it? And how do you think it could help us if we did do this and do
Mm.
this, whatever? And there's still a lot of autonomy with how you use tools. And so the ways that I find value in AI is task based stuff. So because I've gotten a lot of feedback about how I communicate, maybe I'm too direct or this or that. You can imagine when you're not talking to me on a microphone, I don't know, maybe my Slack messages are straightforward because I put a period at the end, which is real feedback.
Oh, you put a period at the end.
I'm like,
Oh,
I don't know. That's what my English teacher told me to do. You put a
scary.
period. Yeah. So I have to be like, oh, it's okay if not about
Exclamation
everything,
point. No,
right?
kidding. No, put
Because
your periods. You
yeah,
deserve to put the period.
well, think about real leaders I've talked to. They're never being like, you know what I mean? They're just
Yeah.
like, here's the thing, which is so funny. If you're an IC and you do it, they're like bad, but if you're a leader, they're like good. So anyway, I use it to run through messages I'm sending because I'm an anxious person. I'm like, does this sound okay? Can you help me make this sound da
Smart.
da da? Which is funny. I wanted to be an English major, and my
Oh,
grammar has always been pretty bad. So I run it through with that. I also help it with Stripe has a lot of great tools. Obviously, we have our own internal MCPs we have those slash chat. So it would be like ChatGPT, or if you want to use
nice.
Claude, you
Yeah.
can use Claude, stuff like that, where I can use it to search all of our documentation. I've actually done it to be like, is there any past research on da da da? Can you tell me blah, 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 blah? And it'll
Yeah.
spit stuff out and it saves me so much time. I've also used it to make prototypes because I find it super helpful for other stakeholders to see what I'm thinking. Now, with that said, those prototypes take a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of prompting. So when I see people on LinkedIn being like, design is so dead, design or whatever is out now and it's going to be crazy or you're going to lose your job, whatever. I'm like, First of all, prompting is really hard. Like,
Yeah.
I don't see anybody saying that. Prompting is hard. You have to know how to prompt. You have to know how to create prompts. A lot of people don't. So when you aren't good at prompting, you're going to do a lot of cleanup with AI to smack it across the face and be like, do this, because it starts to feel like that. You're like, hey, where did this color come from? And what the heck is that? It'll hallucinate in the design, which is why I also feel like if you want to stay relevant as a designer in the world of AI, I think it would be good to go back to basics and just learn the basics of HTML and CSS and JavaScript, because that makes going into the code that the AI produces, right? Because you can just put it
Yeah.
in like a GitHub repo or use Cloud Code. You can just go in and fix stuff, which is so much faster to me than telling it what to do.
Yeah.
I still have a ways to go. I'm still learning. And I used to do front end engineering before I got into design. Everything's out the window now. I need a refresher. But
Yeah.
I'm finding it like, I think AI is great at generating ideas for me with design. It's really good at coming up with a couple variations of prototypes. I don't know if you've ever used UX Pilot.
Not yet.
I love it. I was even hesitant to say it because I'm like, oh, it's my little
Yeah.
secret. I don't use it at Stripe because it's not a Stripe approved tool, but I've used it in the past and I've used it in my personal work. And it's really good at generating ideas. You can give it a prompt and it'll come up with screens, and it's actually really clever. And that's about as far as I see it. I've never ever been able to prompt AI and it created something that I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this is good. This is done. This is. I think I would say I use AI in my work to help me with the things that have held me that I know have held me back, whether that's communication style, that's insights that took weeks to track down before. You had to talk to stakeholders, you had to talk to users. Now I can actually just search through all of our Google Docs or our Trailhead documentation or whatever we have set up to find answers. I can also use it to inquire about data and just say, hey, what trends this and this.
Yeah.
I see a lot of articles saying AI is going to make people dumber because it makes us think less, etc. So I make sure actually that when I talk to AI, I make it explain stuff. I'm like, tell me why and tell me how. So when I've had it correct code, I'm like, why is that the right way?
Yeah.
So I at least try to have it keep teaching me too.
That's smart.
It's really helpful when you're like explain like I'm 5. I'm gonna be honest, I use it sometimes when people mention a word that I don't know.
Yeah.
Even as simple as a dictionary. I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? What the heck? I think it's a tool that will help us, but people need to be responsible about it. That's what I think. I hope that executives across tech try to fight a good fight and use it where necessary and really not waste resources using it in places that we don't need to for the sake of optimization. Like,
Yeah. You
yeah,
don't like the credit burning competitions?
not real.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of
Oh, wow.
internet companies. They're like, oh, who can use the most credits and stuff like that is like
Gosh.
a unfortunately real thing. But I do appreciate just like how you are thinking about the ways to use AI that are speeding things up for you versus where it might be more frustrating and maybe worth just considering, should I just be doing this myself or is this a good use of my time? And it sounds for research, for example, it can be really helpful. But then when it comes to prototyping, you might be engaged in a text-based battle for a
Yeah.
while to figure out how to make a certain series of interactions.
Dude, the prototyping stuff, everybody now wants to produce their own prototype, which is not okay. It's a double edged sword. I don't want to
Yeah.
be a downer. I'll say product managers or architects or whoever's involved in the project, if they know how to prompt stuff, they'll go make a prototype and be like, I was thinking this. I do embrace it because I think we should. People just want to be involved, where I make sure that people are committing to concepts and narrative frames, not literal design.
Yeah.
And what people have done, it's a tale as old as time before AI prototypes existed, where you show a wireframe, right? Remember when we used to say words like low fidelity and high
Mhm.
fidelity? Whereas now everything seems to be high fidelity with AI prototypes. But when you would show a low fidelity thing, there's always one stakeholder that is really stuck either on the UI details. Oh, why does it look like that? Is it going to look like that? Is it going to be this? And they're not focusing on the concepts of here's how we applied our logic. Here's what the numbers told us. Here's why we came up with the solution. There's always somebody stuck on the wrong thing. And that's the other part. The other part I mentioned as the double-edged sword in AI prototypes is somebody gets married to something really fast. Like
Yeah.
they just rush that relationship. They're like, cool, I really like this. Let's build this. And there's no anything that can really say, is this the right definition or not? And to the problem we're solving. So it's like it speeds stuff up, but I think any process, it's going to introduce a different way of talking about design, a different way of producing design, where I almost feel like it really mimics growth design. Have you ever
Yeah.
done growth design?
Yeah. Oh, for
Okay.
sure. It's very, yeah, hypothesis driven. We're going to tweak and figure out we're gonna test our way to the ideal
Yeah.
experience.
You flip the traditional one where you do start sometimes with the prototypes, which a lot of traditional design processes don't. Which I think is outdated, to be honest. There's no reason we need to design 3 months after we've done all the research. So I think there's value in learning faster. They say fail fast,
Yeah.
but getting feedback sooner reminds me of when I did growth design at Amplitude and Apollo, because that's all it is. You're getting to the prototype sooner with AI, and you're showing it to people, and you're getting feedback. That is never going to replace
Yeah.
talking to people, getting feedback, and testing stuff with real numbers. It just never is. So even if there's a world where AI replaces what we do in Figma, there's just I don't see any value in replacing all the other things we do, and I'm really tired of people conflating that design only happens in Figma.
I agree with that. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
had times recently where I've had to really nudge people to focus more on the problem and the concepts behind the prototype and have more discussion about that because we can execute so quickly when it's time. Are we solving the right thing? Are the objects that we're using the right objects, as I alluded to earlier? That is the stuff that really is what stands between your users trusting and wanting to use your product and maligning you on social media. So I would much rather get that right. And I've actually had to recommend, push for types of user research that don't even potentially use a prototype at all, gasp, like different kinds of
Right.
formats that are more like, oh, what if we just describe a concept to them with words and they can tell us what they're imagining and we can then say, okay, so this is what we were thinking in a description and then just see how they react to that.
That's my favorite way
That's
to
great.
do research. And
Yeah.
I've done that at every job I've ever had. That's always the type of research I push because I call it poisoning the well when you show a design. Now they
Yep.
just focus on what they like about it and what they would fix about it, but they're not telling you what they were thinking.
Yeah.
And now they can't because whatever they were thinking now has just been poisoned by what they just saw.
Yes.
And yeah, so I fully agree with you. And I think that like it's almost like plugging in a light bulb. Like designers, I feel like we plug in a light bulb. The whole work is like we build a light bulb and then we plug it in, we see if it works or if it doesn't work. And then this AI layer is like the lampshade.
Yep.
And sometimes the stakeholders are like, I want to look at the lampshade. I want to talk about the lampshade. And no one's asking if does the light turn on? Is it going to turn on or not?
Yeah, and like
And
how
like,
bright should it be and like all that stuff.
yes,
They're just like, I don't like that the lampshade is purple.
yes. And why is it shaped like that? It just shouldn't be shaped like that. So for me, I'm like, if AI replaces the lampshade, that's fine. But it's and maybe this is like maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot and a year from now I'll listen to this and be like, damn, you were so wrong. But I just don't see it replacing the light bulb part.
I agree with you. That's my personal opinion right now as well. Like time is always moving forward. We'll see where we land. I will be honest with you. I felt like this period of time has a lot of parallels to the previous should designers code period of time where everybody got really stuck on the new tooling that was coming out and focused less on the actual execution of experiences. It was like, oh, you still use Axure? Why aren't you using Sketch or whatever? And it's like, okay, everybody, chill. Like
We
the
love to
tools
do
will
that,
always
don't
be
we?
changing. Yeah, we
I
love
wrote
that.
I wrote that article that was like design's not dead, you're just confused. And it was like the same concept. It's like, why is this the only industry where we die every time something new comes out and then just reinvent ourselves? I don't know. It feels like a lot of sensationalism and click probably baby type of activities. So I honestly stay off LinkedIn a lot more now because I just can't take the AI discourse right now. You can tell when people wrote with AI too, they'll be like, today I did this. But that's not all I did.
Oh my
I
God.
also did this. And it wasn't just this, it's really also this. It drives me
With an
nuts where
M
I'm like,
dash.
yes. At this point, I'm gonna start just letting my bad grammar exist in my LinkedIn post because at least people will be like, she definitely wrote that. Damn, that's
Yes.
missing a comma and it's spelled wrong. And but at least like I did
Expand,
it.
I add extra letters. I'll be like, so just because I know that AI is not writing so with so
Oh
many
my
O's in it,
god.
we
Wait till
we
they
have to
do,
get back.
right?
Yeah, I
It's
know.
wait till
Ugh,
ChatGPT has a model that's, oh my god, let's totally kiki about this. Girl, can you know what I mean? I have a feeling like at some point they're gonna try to like add different personalities to it to try to mimic.
you're right.
I shouldn't.
Ugh.
I mean, maybe
Oh
somebody heard that and now
no.
they have an idea now. Don't do that. We
Don't do
don't
that.
want
Just
it.
if any startup founders are listening, please don't do
Yeah,
that.
don't
Thank
do it.
you.
Invent something that gets rid of AI,
That would be
like
sick.
which is technically just giving birth to somebody, right? It's like a
Oh yeah.
human.
Yeah, just make more people, I guess. I don't know. I'm
I don't
like,
know about
should we
that. I'm
make
not
more
interested in
people? I
that.
don't know.
I don't know if
It's
I
a
want to do
weird.
that, but Is the opposite of AI a human?
Question mark. Yeah, deep
Right?
thoughts. Okay, I do have one other question, and this is semi-related, I feel like, because I think AI is very short-term thinking in terms of how a lot of the forcing of employees to use it has been going. I think we are seeing a lot of employers think about, okay, short-term gain, short-term gain. In my course, a lot of people have asked about, like, I'm trying to get promoted. I'm trying to advance. I'm trying to figure out what's next for my career. Should I be focusing more on delivering a short term win for the company, or should I be trying to push more for those longer term kinds of projects? What do you think?
I think AI has no impact on my response, but what I would say is everything is about intention, and you'll find a lot of conflicting feedback where maybe there's people in your ear that are like, do something short term to prove that you're worthy, or you might have people saying, well, do something that's more long term so you can prove that you offer scalable solutions and you can have impact over time. I think what it is intention and thoughtfulness behind what you offer in your position or what you offer to your company. And every company seems to really be focusing on optimizing more than ever. It's a keyword that has gone out of style. For some reason, it's back, and it's because everyone's AI allows me to optimize time and
Efficiency.
you might stand out more than you think if you just put a little effort into proposing things that are intentional and thoughtful. And maybe AI helped you reach that solution, but AI can only do what it's told to do with the information that it has. It can never produce whatever creative thought comes into your mind. But if you come up with an idea that hasn't been done before, I think creativity is going to be more important than ever because AI can't really be creative, right?
Yeah.
It's taking from everything else. And so I think your impact comes with how you help people move through conversations, how you help people reach solution, how you help people make decisions with you. Bring people with you. No matter
Yeah.
what you do as a designer, bring people with you when you think through stuff and make decisions. Don't do the thing where you work through things in a silo and then you only come to people with your solution. Bring people with you when you're trying to figure it out because you'll really see how much I think team members really value that and put that in design where they're like, "Oh, I you want to be the coworker that they're like, "Oh, let's go talk to they're really good at
Yeah.
helping us just get these things out and think through them." And with everybody so focused on solutions right now, don't fall into the trap of being I can maybe you do have a good solution, but don't fall into the trap of saying I can add value because I can think of solutions really quickly that are probably going to work for where we're at right now. So I guess my answer is almost a cop out because it's neither and it's both at the same time. And that sounds like not that helpful, but it's more around I see where I add value. I guess I can speak from like a personal
Yeah.
anecdote or example is like I see the value I add as like a realist, right? I'm not a pessimist. I'm not an optimist. I think it's important to be optimistic about certain things, but I want to be real with the team about like where we're going and what we're solving. And sometimes being real also means, do we really need it to have all of these things right now? Probably not. And AI doesn't make you have those things faster, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a good engineer to have those things, that period.
Yeah.
So I I would say if you're in a position where you feel like you have to question the value you offer your company around is it a short-term impact or long-term impact with the solutions you offer in your work and like how you show up, you're probably one just feeling the fear of will you be replaced by AI, but I don't know. I don't know if I would feel good working at a company where I'd have to question that. And maybe that's because I'm very lucky and blessed to be at Stripe, where they've democratized the opinions of AI. We're allowed to share what we think and feel. They're not like
Yeah.
enforcing stuff.
Respect.
Yeah, and there's a lot of designers that even have big opinions about AI, where they're like, I don't know. I'm a what do you call it? A skeptic, an AI
Yeah.
skeptic.
Skepticism is great also.
Yeah, I
And I
think so
do
too.
yeah, I appreciate you calling out it's like partially like how you show up in the work that you choose to do. Cause I think there's the tactical execution of take on one short-term project and one long-term project and do that over and over again. One short-term, then take on a long-term or whatever. But then the way you show up is actually the thing that shows hiring managers and leaders at your company that you're ready to get that promotion or that you're doing a good job. If people aren't, like you said, actually saying, hey, I want to work with this person, and they're not giving that kind of feedback about how you're actually operating and how you're pushing thinking to be more considerate or of a higher quality, then that's actually one of the biggest blockers for people in terms of getting that promotion or It's the difference between somebody who is viewed as a value add to the company or not. So I love
Yeah.
the idea of it being more focused on how you execute the work and like how you push the team to be better. Because as we know, quality is only going to get more important.
Yeah, because if you talk about short versus long term, you'll also people might become afraid to delegate things or to split things up because if you phase stuff up, maybe that makes it take longer. But maybe there's wins in the middle. If you have three phases, maybe phase one gets you to the short term impact because you can have a short term win in a long term project too, right? You can
Yeah.
split it up into phases. And so it's also, and maybe my spicy take is that no matter who's involved in the work and how many people you work with, I have found in a lot of places, the majority of the time, doesn't happen all the time, majority of time, design still gets questioned. Like, why did this thing not succeed? Why did we come to this solution? And who designed it? I'm sure you've heard that before,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Who designed this? It's never what team owned this feature, what team, maybe I shouldn't say never, but I hear the former a lot. I hear who designed this when it doesn't do well. So you're going to be held accountable for the decisions, whether or not you realized you didn't make a decision or you did make a decision. So you might as well just make what you feel is best for the outcome that everyone's working toward. So think about the user, but think about the company and the team too. I always ask myself when I start a project, what's the ideal outcome? What are we working towards? What do we want from this set of work? Period. It's
Yeah.
not like I need to know all of these things before I can tell you my opinion. I'll just ask the PM usually is the most informed about it. What is it we want from this? Like in just one sentence. And don't be afraid to define if the work is short or long. I had a project at Stripe where my manager thought it might take a couple months. And after looking at everything and talking with people, I was like, I think this is going to take me 2 weeks. And it did.
Mm.
And it's awesome. It's well received. And then there's other stuff that has taken a lot longer. And I think that's okay. So just be prepared, yeah, to communicate. And AI will help you move faster, but you don't want to just add solution to kind of save your skin in the moment because you're like, see, I can work with AI and I'm just as fast and just as good. Because what it really comes down to is design thinking. I think that's what makes a really great designer is the way that you apply your design thinking. I totally don't even think about UI, I'm going to be honest, when I think about really good designers. I'm just not.
I get you. Yeah, it is important and it's there, but it's let's figure out the right problem and directionally the solution we want to provide in terms of the value to the person who's going to use this, and then we can figure out a little bit more in depth about how we want to treat it. I think that's still the way I operate, and I will continue to operate because otherwise it starts conflating things and it gets really stressful. Thank you for sharing all of that. I am curious as we get closer to a close, what is keeping you in design right now? Obviously, we just talked about a bunch of stuff that's kind of wacky. What's
Mhm.
keeping you going in design?
I love solving problems. I love solitaire, I love Sudoku. Everything I do is problem based. If it's a video game, for example, I really like the puzzle video games. I'm obsessed with like when Zelda Breath of the Wild came out.
Oh,
I think I've
nice.
replayed it 3 times, but I was like the second time I played it, I was like, I'm gonna go to every what were they called? They're not tombs, but they're like, you know what I'm talking about?
But I'm not really I've never really played a Zelda game beyond Four Swords. I'm sorry.
Oh my god, what? Okay, you have to. Breath of the
I
Wild is
know.
so good.
I know.
But for a while, I became really stressed out by video games because growing up, I played Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, that type of
Oh,
stuff.
the joy.
I have to collect everything in the level. I do. I don't like when it's at 98%, 99%. And if it takes me forever to solve, like, where is it? How do I get there? Like, I'll do it. And so design is something that I find I can really lean into that problem solving bit where I like when it's not super straightforward. And then on the other side, I'm really creative. I love painting. I love drawing. I'm not very good at it, but I like doing it. And I really like being able to express the creative side. I like being able to contribute to things, even if it's in a small way that make someone's life a little easier, a little better. And I think right now, I also really like psychology. And there's just so much
Yeah.
psychology in design. The way somebody uses a product is really interesting to me. I think I stay in design because I like solving problems. I also like helping people. And I feel like it's at the intersection of both. And I feel like the way that design is going to move, it really needs people that care about people. You have
Yeah.
to keep the empathy in design. And I've seen the word human centered design die off more late. I don't know. Are you noticing that? I'm noticing people replacing
Yeah,
human
yeah,
centered
it
and
was
saying
a thing
AI
for a
centered.
while. Then people were like, human-centered design is meh. And it's like, okay, but like actually though, we do kind of need to have the conversation go back to being about people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy though, because the way the internet is moving is like you really do have to think about how to design for other agents and MCPs, which to
Yeah.
me is like the what is it, like Black Mirror? You're like, what?
Yeah.
What? I'm not designing for people in some instances. But I think, yeah, I just really like helping people. I know that sounds kind of corny, but, and I find that people I connect with in design, they're really similar. They like helping people. They're really friendly. They're super creative and really kind. And kindness it goes such a long way. And I really believe, like, in a world where you can be anything, just be kind. I think design is very kind. It's been very kind to me, and I want to be kind back. And I don't know. I wish my answer wasn't so, oh, whatever. That's super corny, but it's the
No,
truth. And
I'm still in design for actually a
yeah,
very similar reason. So I don't think it's corny at all personally. And I want more people like the both of us to stay in design because I also believe that we are more critical to have in the industry than ever. I think there are different types of designers out there, but I think the kind of designer who's a bit more like architecture oriented is really important so that people don't lose the plot or like businesses don't lose the plot in kind
yeah,
of the race to agentify everything.
at the bottom.
Yeah, I think we help people think. And
Mhm.
so I think our role is really important.
What's probably the most important is I don't think design's neutral. I should really say that. I do not think design is neutral in any way, shape, or form. I think design has been involved as a form of protest for a long time
Yep.
throughout history. If you think about even the peace sign, right? It's a design, it's representative of a million things in movements and revolutions. And I do think there's going to come a period in our digital world where designers can't stand by and be neutral to some of the decisions that companies want to make with
Yep.
design. And that's another reason I stay, because there needs to be positive voices in the room that won't let certain design decisions kind of succumb to maybe those darker UX patterns, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's another reason that I stick around is yeah, you got to force people to have the hard conversation to think, to consider who's going to be harmed by certain product decisions because there's a lot of optimists in the space. And so you need pragmatic, down to earth people to force that realism, that realist conversation to happen. For those who are watching or listening to this, I would definitely recommend a book called Caps Lock, which is more about the relationship between graphic design and capitalism, but it also grounded me in the recognition that design can either help or harm. It can contribute to the system in certain ways that we don't like. It can uphold the system or it can make you think, like you mentioned, Megan. And we do have a role and we do have some power to push people towards certain decisions or away from them. Speaking of being in leadership roles, what advice would you have for somebody who is new to the staff or lead design position?
Ooh, I would say don't doubt yourself if you find yourself thinking, what am I doing? I have imposter syndrome, this or that. Lean into design should not be a blocker. So you shouldn't block people, but you should lead meaningful discussions. So try to see yourself as a facilitator when you find yourself surrounded by a lot of opinions, which you will. And a lot of those opinions don't agree with each other. And a lot of those opinions have to do with design, because design ultimately has a say and a contribution to the outcome or the final solution. And so your superpower is going to be getting people to agree when they really don't. So don't be afraid to ask questions, get people aligned. I would say bring people along sooner rather than later. Try not to work in a silo. And don't be afraid to learn new things and get ahead of the curve. If you're feeling fearful about I think knowledge is power. And the best way that you can stay ahead of it is to stay involved and know the pros and cons, and maybe even help your leaders understand the pros and cons of them and have a say in how they're used, right? The only way you can do that is if you're informed about them. So don't be afraid to say no, but don't block people. And also know that it can be overwhelming and that's okay. And you probably will experience, I don't want to say failure, but challenges that might even push the way that you think about the role you're in and the responsibilities you have. And that's totally normal. At the end of the day, you should be proud of yourself for finding yourself in this role if you're new to it. But also know that communication will get you a really long way, and so will transparency. And try not to lose that empathetic vulnerability that you come with. And I think the last thing I'd add is don't fall into the trap of only fighting for what users need. I see that a lot. Only fighting for what you know users need, and you accidentally ignore what the team and the business is saying they need. And sometimes, unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes user needs do collide with what the business is saying they need. It doesn't mean you can't do both. It just makes it a little trickier and you need to figure out how to do both. But you will lose credibility. This is what I've seen. You'll lose credibility if you only speak to what users want with your stakeholders. they'll be very frustrated that you're not thinking about what other teams need and what the business needs. And if you're staff, that's your job. You got to think about the org and the business. So your impact can go a really long way. So don't be afraid to ask hard questions and have an impact. And the only way you can have an impact is by, I would say, staying engaged, engaging others, making allies, accessing some level of data, please, if you can, and not being fearful to ask hard questions and say no or say yes.
That's
And
all
always
so
know
real.
why.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Please always have a reason that you're,
Yes.
yeah, you have to have a reason for most things. Yeah. Love all of that advice and wish those were things that I had access to when I became a staff designer. Awesome. Last question. So, in addition to your wonderful quotes in the staff designer, grow, influence, and lead as an individual contributor by moi, where else can people find you out there on the internet?
Oh, okay. I totally just said that I'm not on LinkedIn a lot, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a website, but that's morely if you want to look at my work or browse and read stuff about me. I have an Instagram, but it's more shit posting. Honestly, maybe I should be one of those designers that I have a blue sky and an X and
You
da, da,
have
da.
joined me on Blue Sky.
I have a blue sky. I never use it. I'm like, I'll tweet something. I'm just going to call everything a tweet. I tweet and people don't respond to it. And I'm like, oh, I'm a loser. And so I just don't open the
Oh,
app.
yeah, the
I'm no, I'm,
dopamine's
I'm
not there
partly joking,
yet.
but like,
I'll make sure that I'm following you on there so I can be the one yapper with you.
right, yeah, it just becomes a way we communicate with each other. I would say LinkedIn's the best way. And then from there, I'm on it once in a while, so you'll find me there. But yeah, I highly recommend reading Catt's book if you haven't and taking the class. I do want to say after taking your course, the last just like a last final plug was it really did help me help others understand like how my impact and how I showed up was very different from team members who were senior and also very good at what they did and could be seen as staff, but they weren't. So they didn't have the same access to the responsibilities. I would say having the language and the frameworks that you provide in your course really helped explain to people who are very confused why some designers were on some projects and some weren't.
Oh, that makes me really happy to hear. I mostly run the course to be able to help people and to pass along things that I wish I knew. So I'm really happy that I was able to help you out. And yeah, thanks for helping me by joining me today on this episode. You all heard where you can find Megan on the internet. LinkedIn is the way. And that's it. See you next time.